I'm Lucy, and this is Sam. And this is a story that we've made. This won't answer everything. I don't know if anyone really deserves an explanation. We don't care to evangelize, and we don't care that you don't understand. But you've deigned to ask, and so I must oblige. But believe me, you won't be the last. As I make this transcript, I realize I'm adding a fourth artifact to the three that already tell the same story. This transcript, Stephen's dictaphone tapes, the anonymous photographer's Polaroids, and of course, Julian's digital model. All but the first, the model, are irrelevances, and this is by far the most vulgar. Everything you really need to understand is present in that. All our research amounted to was a realization of this fact. Stephen's recordings are just a gloss on that process, and this document a gloss on that. The pictures are little more than an ugly afterthought, but they brought us to the diagram, so I guess they had their use. Have you seen them? Don't. Recording 13, 10:49, December 21st, 2002, a computer lab belonging to a small-town polytechnic, somewhere near the Scottish border. Sliding door access above entry ramp, too small for a car, likely suited to small goods conveyances. Two ancillary segments to the left and right of central spire, function unclear. Review dimensions of stairwell. Central spire, no indication of curvature. Could be housing for the central atrium. No other segments seem large enough. It's like a vision of hell. That last voice on the tape is my own. That such a structure was ever fashioned is not a matter of common knowledge, but the life it had taken on in our minds was by then very real to us indeed, and every bit as detailed as that diagram. In that moment, 3 months into our investigation, it felt like an end point. The turning of the final shovel load that brings up the bodies. It was not, but it marked the end of the first phase at least. Stephen had scrutinized every center of it, poring over every pixel, the scattered iterations of white and grey and mussel-flesh orange, that synthesis of cheap marble and aluminium, affordances for pipes and wires and other such necessities. But it all sounds so dry like this. I couldn't describe to you the sensation of seeing the thing from all angles. There was no comfortable distance to do so, you see. Too close and the pixels swim and burgeon like disturbed insects. Too far, and an unexpected pang of loneliness seemed unavoidable. It was just there, alone in an uninterrupted digital landscape of simulated grass and sky, with spring flowers spilling outwards in fractal arrays, these blossoms of silicon, these fruiting bodies of artificial daisies, a vision of hell indeed. And hell, as you should know, is always personal. The world first learned of the house in Belarus when an anonymous poster had uploaded 5 images to an architecture forum. They showed various angles of a digital model of a house. It was on so many levels an ugly thing, like a debasement of Frank Lloyd Wright. And one might have called it functional, and there could have perhaps been beauty in that, were it possible to conceive of any function that such a building might have served. Most of the responses were amusement. Others backhandedly admired its defiance to convention and taste. To Stephen and myself, however, it had a different importance. It was the last place that we had seen Julian alive. The pictures, then. The ones that arrived anonymously to Julian's old office before they reached us, alerting us to his 13-month absence. I'll use Stephen's description. It seemed the most concise. It was the first of his many tapes, back when his obsessive recording seemed simply an affectation and not the primary focus of his research. That is, what you might have had described as experiments in what he called auto-divination, the ones I didn't know about. This was before my faith was still a rational one, and before he started to sound just like Julian had done. Recording 2, Stephen's flat, South London, time undisclosed. 39 images in all, Date stamp indicates a period between June and early July 2001. Honestly, they could be anywhere from 1969 onwards. The first couple, a minibus of men and women, mostly young, wearing slacks and button-down shirts. Disembarking, National Park maybe? They're eating lunch at picnic tables. Later, there's a large compound surrounded by a chain-link fence, most likely a campsite. Number 8, the first of any real significance. It shows a large glade in a bowl of densely wooded hills. This is where we first see the building. First impression, not right. Like it reflects light wrong, but the design itself is, and then there's a pause, wrong. Like if you imagine a dinosaur crudely edited into the frame, that's the best way I can put it. Number 9, black. Blocked by a lens cap left down or perhaps taken at night. Number 10, overexposed. Number 11, the field again. Evidently around the same time. You can see the people in it now, standing at a distance, impression of a pattern, clothes, different from earlier pictures. They're all facing away, no sign of movement. Number 12, interior, somewhere without windows. 3 men lying against a wall or squatting down, looking exhausted, but happy. Always happy. Look closely. The flash brings up swatches of black mold growing along the walls. They go on like this. Number 21, this one is really something else. Also overexposed, but enough detail visible to discern a prone figure in an open space. Interior now. Looks like a large room under a skylight. Probably the same cylindrical chamber that featured a number of those later shots. I've come to call it the atrium, for want of a better term. 22, 23, 24, more night shots. Black, but the lens cap is definitely not covered this time. It strikes me that we may be witnessing someone's ill-fated attempt to photograph a passing plane. 25, 26, 28, more innocuous shit. 29 is indoors again. First confirmed dead. There are so many more than we thought. Mostly outside or in the central atrium. Number 32, 9 or so persons leaning against the walls of a narrow corridor. Can confirm that these are, once more, different people. 34 is my favourite thing. Looks like a severed head lying on the ground. Would you believe it's almost comical? It's like something out of a Victorian daguerreotype. A reluctant second glance though, and you'll see that it's still attached. His eyes are open for God's sake. It looks like he's rising somewhere from below. Take a look at those angles. And take a look I did. When I could eventually bring myself to look at them, that was after much persuasion from Stephen. It was significant because that was the first time we'd even considered there might be a basement. There were more, those that I didn't care to study long. Stephen's detachment from all this was admirable. Then there was a picture apparently out of sequence with these others. That's the only one I could bring myself to keep. It shows 5 men gathered around a wall chart. The clock shows 3:15, as does the timestamp, and they're smiling. Not the riptous grin of their fellows on the ground in the other shots, but expressions born of genuine elation, and I found myself smiling in turn. It was Stephen who first pointed out the figure center right. That smiling face of a hooded man in his mid-30s. The smiling face of a hooded man in his mid-30s who closely resembled Julian. Julian, whom Stephen and I had known at Goldsmiths in the 1980s. Whose artwork had seemed outlandish long before it seemed trite, whom we had not seen in nearly 2 years, and about whom we now began to harbour grave concerns. There was one final image. The timestamp showed 6 o'clock on the morning of July 8th. It was the exterior of the building, the then and still unknown building. This one showed the thing in the most detail. Those uniquely functionless architectures that would henceforth become the principal subject of Stephen's investigations, even before such questions of location or ownership proved definitively futile. But even after the screenshots emerged and the digital ghost of that building would come to haunt us, even after the fateful trip to Scotland, even then, it didn't occur to us that Julian would have some role in its design. After we got back from Scotland, we went our separate ways. following up acquaintances with promises to meet in the new year. That meeting never happened, but we kept in close contact those first few months. Of Julian's once prolific artworks, surprisingly little seemed to have survived. We spoke to journalists who'd attended private exhibitions of his increasingly cryptic works, heard descriptions of films he'd screened that lacked a strong aesthetic awareness. We learned of uncomfortable scenes at parties, the death by overdose of a sometime collaborator, a minor police incident around February of 1994, the unveiling of a model town populated by grasshoppers, a sudden interest in computers towards the end of the decade. But all this you already knew, because if you're asking me, then I assume you read that damned article, back when I thought bringing the affair to the attention of the public had borne anything but pain. But I did look for a physical house for a while, and I started with the pictures. England seemed too small to hide something like this, too many eyes and too many roads. We'd heard about strange things happening out in Wales, hippies going out west and going weird amongst the valleys back in the 60s. Perhaps there was some hangover of the New Age scene, the fascination of the UFO, shades of Rendlesham. The words Black Ops Site rang through our minds, and we wondered for a time whether the house was not in fact a research facility, or perhaps a church. We'd long ago decided that Belarus was a misnomer. It was too much like one of a number of disconnected places that populated Julian's later works. The Nepalese garden, the chapel in Salzburg, the embassy of Frinton-on-Sea. Together they formed a weird geography, a coded series of names whose mythology seemed all their own. Perhaps there was a house in Belarus somewhere that formed the basis for it, analogous in some thematic or functional capacity. Between the pictures and the model, there seemed to be space for many more. A copy of a copy, a plague of recursions. It was around then that I started to follow suit with Stephen, to start making my own recordings that I would listen back through obsessively, and crucially, to begin making a model of my own. You see, the digital model, the one we were now certain was Julian's creation, showed only the exterior. But in the cachet we took back with us from Scotland, there had been hints of something else. There were scraps of code, corrupted subfiles and notes, suggestions that these form part of a corresponding model that contained the lower reaches of the complex. Of these was something Stephen called the outer forms. This referred to 5 squat blocks that radiated from the bulk of the complex in an asymmetric pattern. He deduced they must be vents belying an even greater substructure of tunnels. It was from these that I began my first steps towards replication, successfully as it would happen. What I found is something I've reiterated a number of times to your predecessors, though always inadequately after the first I found. I henceforth include the transcript. Recording number 89, New Year's Day 2003. Location, Kent, time 2 a.m. Reconstruction of picture 31. The angle of the strip light set into the sloping walls through the doorway leading down from the central atrium in picture number 17, distance 23 meters. The light refracted from the upper floor through the grille of the ceiling of the corridor in picture number 9, distance 18 meters. No purpose, no unity of form, no golden ratio, only angles. Note thick aluminium pipes snaking around perimeter of lower atrium in picture number 21. A number of stairs counted upon the staggered vent that runs alongside the maintenance lift in picture number 22. Reckoning by array of ventilation towers clustered towards northern point design asymmetrical. The lowest point corresponds to here, close but not directly beneath the maintenance tower furthest out towards the compound's northwestern perimeter. Figures in picture 36 upside down. Ceiling pictured is in fact floor. The light is not a reflection. Blood depicted has not coagulated. This is not a mistake, a manipulation, or a corruption of the film. Other shapes unknown. Biological qualities now visible, definite, and disturbing. Julian's mathematical statements confirm details up to this point, and nothing beyond what is undeniable. That is, the lowest point is also the highest. One can only imagine what it's like to be there. This vision of hell. This lowest point where all the world's suffering gathers like silt. A sedimentary layer of river mud, gazing up through all that is material. You knew it would be here, Stephen. You found it first, after all. Recording 40, the last, now, date unspecified, time of recording late. Julian is still there. In a sense, he always was. He found it first, after all. I know because I'm there too, now, and so is Stephen, though he went a little further. That day he went out to the site, drove his car up an impossible mound of pulverized material, uttered his last into the dictaphone before he climbed up over the dashboard and into the sky with the ease of a diving bird. I never got so far, but the thing we call heaven still acknowledges those who wait, who stayed pinned to the rational and the solid, and it loves them in its way. A love that cannot speak its name for fear the syllables might bleed through. But when I'm there, I speak them freely, and I am often there. I'm there when I'm unspooling the reels of tape that mark the thread of my ever-narrowing existence. I am there when I drink. I'm there when I'm recording static to cover the sound of things I don't or no longer wish to remember having said. I'm there when I break open my copy of the model, the diagram of the house in Belarus, and read for Julian's fingerprints in the raw data. When I see the walls and vents and tunnels assemble like glowing vector patterns in the endless silicone night. But how can I say all this now? It's hard to imagine, I know. My body is out in Thamesmead, my mind still in Scotland. But the soul I learned I possessed only once its absence was noted. That's with Julian, and Stephen too, now, and one day we'll be whole. But I can't say how. I'm sorry.